Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV. You look like you've got two guys who are going to smack you in the side of their heads.
Yes. Yeah, I found a bit of just Dark Ages art,
Okay.
so we can convince people that 2 weeks have passed.
Feels like it.
Yeah, probably should have changed my top as well. Sort of. I've got my Transformers hoodie on though, but
You've been wearing it for 2 weeks.
yeah. Well, actually, that's not too unbelievable.
I've just been in the interim, made myself a cup of coffee, and Nell, our most recent addition as a grandchild, she's here. Leslie's babysitting.
Mm.
So I've been having to dance along to Mr. Tumble with a. Have you ever,
Excellent.
have you ever seen Mr. Tumble?
I
Justin Fletcher.
haven't.
The guy's an absolute legend. He really is.
No, new one on me. Uh, joys of
Mm,
grandparenting.
yeah. Um,
Right. So,
what's been happening to you since we last?
well, cup of tea,
Oh yeah.
bag of cheesy Watsits, Yeah, the high life here. But yeah, no, otherwise I think we'll continue our little chat about Dreamwave and
Hmm.
sort of all the fallout from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what came next?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So,
I guess we might as well go then. So it'll be your
yeah,
turn to introduce, won't it?
it will be, yes. And we're episode 13, aren't we? Oh dear.
13.
I know. Yes, episode 13.
Hmm.
Okay, let's go for it.
Go. Go.
Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, episode 13. Lucky for you, I would say. And I'm Simon Furman, writer on Transformers and comics, TV, animation, and so forth in general. And
And I'm Andrew Wildman, artist, comics, games, TV, film, and other stuff.
there we go. Yeah. Also
Pencil for
come to,
hire. I always used to
yeah.
describe myself as a pencil for hire.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what I am, a keyboard for hire or something. So,
Yeah.
yes, here we are. We're going to pick up where we were 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks
Mhm.
ago, yeah. It seems like only half an hour ago, to
It
be
does.
honest.
It's
Yeah.
amazing, isn't
Time's
it?
flown, yeah.
Yes. But like I say, sort of for the Patreon viewers as opposed to listeners, they will see that at least my virtual background has changed in that time.
Yeah, Simon's going to be attacked on either side of his head by who are those two
I think they're
characters?
two of the combiners. They're two of the big
Oh, right.
combiners. I forget which. I just
We'll
grabbed.
get people writing in the comments telling us who they are.
Yes, yeah.
I hope they
It's
do
from
because it'd be nice to know.
it's from War Within the Dark Ages. Just thought I'd flash a bit of that artwork up as we were talking about that last time.
Mm, mm.
As you recall, we were talking about our time respectively with Dreamwave, who had picked up the Transformers comic license in 2002. And we sort of fast forwarded last episode through to 2003 and into 2004, where both of us were working for Dreamwave on War Within the Dark Ages, the
Yeah.
second War Within series. And at the time, I and probably Andrew as well thought, well, great, Dreamwave is the Transformers comic publisher. It's going to last Marvel time,
Yeah.
7, 8 years or something. But it was not to be, as it turned out.
No, a shame, really. It was a great story to draw. We spoke last episode about, excuse me. Um, it was a great book to draw. I mean, the way that it ended up looking at the end was, I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't. I didn't like it that much. It all turned out very dark, but drawing it was good. I mean, some of the scenes that you were writing, um, there was great scope to it. It was, and there was that big like pit thing, wasn't there? What was all that about?
Yeah, the Well of All Sparks,
The
which
yeah.
which is where Bludgeon, who's and the Fallen and Jetfire and whoever else was involved, Grimlock maybe,
Mm.
all end up at the end. And yes, they're sort of in the sort of the nether regions of Cybertron.
The regions, yeah, yeah. So some of those scenes were great I
Mm,
really liked that as an environment. That was nice to kind of put together and draw that one. Some of the interiors as well. I think I've still got a page where there's Prowl in like a control station, and there's different
yeah.
layers of control, kind of booths and everything. Yeah, it was good. It was good fun. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And the other thing
Yeah.
was that when we were working for Marvel, Marvel used to supply the art board. I mean, initially, the first few issues of Transformers that I drew, I used my own art board because I didn't like the Marvel stuff. It was rougher. But then I hit a point where I'd run out of artboard, so I used the free stuff that they sent me, which is all lined up in blue, so it's
Mm,
quite convenient. And I got used to it and really liked it. So, and then Dreamwave did the same thing. They had their own Bristol board that they were send all marked up in blue, but it was really thick. Like the Marvel stuff was just like card, thinnish card, but it
mm.
was, fairly light to post. But for some reason, the Dreamwave stuff was about 4 times thicker. Quite a really heavyweight stock, which I always thought was odd because that would make it cost more, to ship around. But yeah, that again, that was nice stuff to draw on. So they looked after their people in that
And I suppose
sense.
I suppose back in the day you had to ship the artwork to them still.
Yeah.
We weren't scanning in and
Oh no.
sending digitally back then.
No, which is why there's the joy of having those original pages of
Mm,
artwork. I mean, a lot of it's drawn digitally now, but before things were drawn digitally, they would be drawn on artboard, but then just scanned in. So, but no, like you said in the previous episode, you've got some pages of War Within Art, and you can see the pencil and the ink and
mm.
all that kind of thing. So, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, so that it was great to work with you again on that. It felt like old times really, and I was fully expecting you and I would do more stuff. I mean, I don't know what else you were working on around that time.
Um, so I do remember doing some Armada or whatever it was with
Hmm.
Panini, and I remember round about that time doing Power Rangers comics for I guess
Hmm.
that was Panini as well.
Yeah.
I don't know when the movie came out, but I remember doing some Transformers movie, the first Michael Bay movie stuff. Don't know what year that was,
Yeah.
but that was kind of all around about that time.
Yeah, that might have been later, the Michael Bay stuff, because that's 2007, I think, the first live
Oh,
action
okay.
movie. So that
Because
was
at
a
some
little
point,
way off.
yeah, so just after all the Dreamwave stuff, I guess it wasn't all that long after that that I then went into London and was working on a animation project.
Mm.
Um, and then I guess so that movie stuff came after I'd finished the animation project. Yeah. It's so hard to get these things kind of, lined
Yeah.
up in your mind as to when you did them.
And and often you were doing well. I mean, I certainly was working on multiple things at once, and it's hard to pin them down to a, you know, with something like the Marvel Transformers comic, you can kind of, or the other bits for Marvel, you can kind of go, yes, I know exactly when I was working on that, and the same with Dreamwave, same with IDW.
Hmm.
But it's the bits in between that came out and of no less importance to me at the time because it was all good work, but it was you kind of it's harder to pin down what bit came in which
Yeah.
order.
Yeah, 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 very much so. I think also around about that time, um, it's when myself and Leslie, we was coming up with some little projects ourselves, Brando, at that time under the name Wild Ideas. It was somewhere within that
Mm.
period, and pitching ideas to whoever we could pitch ideas to, books and TV and whatever. And we had quite a few good ones. One of which would eventually worked out, but I mean it was a long time before it did.
Mm.
But yeah, work was seen on the ground. So the War Within stuff was good because that was a nice solid chunk of work. Um, but obviously only 6 months for me because it was six issues, wasn't it?
6 issues, yeah.
Yeah. So 6 months work. So either side of that, I was definitely scratching around trying to trying to find something to do.
Yeah.
Not not good times, but there we go.
Yeah, and as again, as I said last time, I'd gone back to freelance. So suddenly there was a lot more, emphasis on finding work and,
Yeah,
making those contacts and connections.
yeah,
And, obviously I was still, I think I was still doing bits and pieces for Titan at the time. I'd edited a series for them called, well, the first book was called Writers on Comic Script Writing,
yes, I
and
remember that.
it was a series of interviews with all the kind of hot writers at the time. I mean, it was an amazing lineup when I look back on those books. And
Mm,
the first one, Writers on Comic Script Writing, that it was written by uh, my friend and work colleague Mark Salisbury, who's a film journalist. He conducted the interviews, and I
okay.
edited the book. And funnily enough, Mark and I are still working together on film projects. So that was another good sort of working and friend relationship that came out of the Titan times.
Yeah. So drop some names as to some of the people that were
Oh,
interviewed.
blimey! I mean, we spoke to Grant Morrison. Um, you know, now I'm struggling to think. I should have had a copy of the
I
book in
think
front of me.
Dave Gibbons was in there, was he?
Yeah, but he was artist on Comic Art, the
Oh,
second
okay.
book, because we
Mm,
did a Holy Writers book, followed by and it was British and American creators.
mm.
And now I've got to dig that out and have a look. But I mean, basically anyone who was hot at the time, we just thought, well, hey, we'll reach out to see if they're up for chatting about the craft of what they do. I think we
Yeah.
spoke to people like Mark Wade and and we did a second Writers on Comic Script Writing book. So it was a series that we developed, and then we got Tom DeFalco, former editor-in-chief of Marvel, to do the next few books,
Mm,
which were character-specific ones. So we had comics creators on Spider-Man, comics creators on Fantastic Four, comics creators on X-Men. And he did all the interviews for those. And again, just had amazing access to just about everybody. I'm pretty sure we interviewed Stan Lee for the first um, Writers on Comic Script Writing book.
oh wow. Yeah.
So I mean, and that was amazing, just
Yeah.
to have Stan the man, talking about his, the art and craft from, I suppose, back in the day.
Mm,
And they were amazing. But and I, bits and pieces of work like that I carried on doing on a freelance basis for Titan, even after I'd left staff. So that connection just continued, which was really good.
mm. Yeah.
But yeah, meanwhile, 2003 to into 2004, um, Dreamwave, I thought was just great. That's it was the bulk of my work. I was doing, as I mentioned also last time, some stuff for 3H on who ran the Transformers conventions in America. And the world was Transformers again, and I didn't mind that at all.
Yeah.
And pretty much straight after the War Within Dark Ages, I started work developing the next War Within series called the Age of Wrath.
Hmm.
And that, that I assumed would just continue and continue. And I'm pretty sure Armada comic had become Energon comic by this point, and that was rolling on nicely. And I was starting to look at doing other stuff for them. I did a brief series called Necro War for
Right.
Dreamwave. It was it was, as far as I know, it was a completely original idea that they wanted me to develop. And it was all sort of, a sort of dark universe invading ours or something, and some commandos kitted out to survive this, sort of almost like a sort of antimatter universe.
Right.
And yeah, it was really nice. And it was drawn by Adi Granov,
Oh,
who
yes.
went
Yeah.
who went on to do Iron Man and many other things for Marvel, and just looked fabulous.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, it didn't sell. It was supposed to be a six-issue series, and only three of them came out, which was really disappointing.
Yeah. 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 It was
Uh,
very different artwork, wasn't it? It wasn't like comic artwork at all. It was very
it was very
vivid and
painted. Yeah,
painterly. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and he worked entirely in computer, which was, quite a new thing in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think he penciled at all. I think it was all sort of on a tablet or on a, on in computer. So it was an interesting one, but yes, gorgeous artwork, absolutely
Yeah.
gorgeous. Very sort of, yes, slightly 3D looking as
Yeah.
as well.
It gave it that very
And
high concept sci-fi kind of feel as well.
mm, yeah, and and that was a shame. I was really excited about that because, once more, it wasn't Transformers. It was something sort of quite different, and I had high hopes for that.
Hmm.
And of course, the whole thing was mapped out. But yeah, only three issues came out in the end, and that was a shame. It would have been nice, but I think there was the thing, and this is what I guess we're going to talk about this time. There was the Dreamwave model wasn't just Transformers. They were trying to branch out. They were trying to bring in other sort of licenses and properties.
Hmm.
But the sort of, as we learned later, their sort of financial management hadn't been great in the initial, sort of surge of interest in those original Transformers comics, which sold gangbusters. And
Yeah.
they must have had this massive influx of money come in.
Yeah.
And there was no hedge against the fact that I think they all went out and bought Porsches, the Lees and the sort of, the high ups at Dreamwave. Don't get me wrong, they were all lovely people to deal with,
Yeah.
but there was fundamentally a problem. And I think they were just young,
Yeah.
sort of people with too much money at the
Well, exactly. I
time. And
mean, it's completely understandable, isn't it? I mean, that kind of young, live fast, die young thing, if you suddenly got a
yeah,
massive success on your hands. I mean, like you said earlier, the assumption was that, hey, this is going to last, we're going to get a
mm,
long run out of this, like Marvel did, so I guess they thought the same.
yeah. But of course, sales didn't stay in those stratospheric levels as, naturally happened. There was this
Of
big
course.
bubble of interest, and then it dwindled down to a core of readership. And like I say, they were bringing in all these other licenses from sort of, to me, obscure games and things that
Yeah.
they were trying to develop as comics. And then there was Necro War and a few other things. And I think they spread themselves too thin. I don't think there was enough sort of, you know, capital put aside for leaner times so
Mm.
that, there wouldn't be this sudden, oh my God, the sales are down.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was rolling on into War Within War Within Age of Wrath, and continuing on other things, unaware really that things were rocky financially in Dreamwave.
Mm.
And at this point, the main core Generation 1 series was being written by two guys. Well, I mean, uh, Adam Patek and Brad Mick,
Yes.
who was also James McDonough. His real name was James McDonough, and they were working as a team on the Generation 1 books while I just chugged along with War Within. And but I think James was also part of the staff there and the operations manager now by this point.
Hmm.
And they obviously he and I guess Adam Patek had the inside track on more on what was going on a day-to-day basis with Dreamwave. And at some point, which this should have rung alarm bells, they kind of bailed and got out.
Right.
And that which was when Dreamwave approached me to do a fill-in on the Generation 1 book. And really the warning sign should have been there, but by then I was working on Energon, War Within, doing this fill-in on Generation 1, and I'd taken over on the Beast Wars series they set up.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I was really busy, but, the next warning sign was when the payments just kind of didn't come when they were supposed to, and you were chasing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then when I heard James and Adam had kind of got out completely, yeah, warning bells were ringing all over the place about the state of Dreamwave finances. But,
Yeah.
you know, they weren't saying that was the case. I was asking them by then, because money wasn't coming through, is everything all right? And their response, weirdly, was to bring me out to America to do a sort of mini sort of signing tour.
Okay.
And, you know, and it was just weird. So I went out and Don and I did a kind of a little sort of, maybe it was only one signing or one event, but we did a signing event.
Hmm.
So it sort of suddenly felt like, oh, well, this can't be a problem if they're sort of, putting sort of, I suppose, promotional resources behind things.
Yeah.
But very rapidly, once I was back from that, it became apparent to the point where I said to them, I'm sorry, I can't carry on
Hmm.
turning in stuff until payments start coming through.
Yeah, fair enough. Did you ever talk to the other two guys who were writing the G1 stuff?
Yeah, I had a line with them, but the trouble was, and I can't remember the reason why. Either I'd fallen out with them or they'd fallen out with me, or certainly
Yeah.
James and I had a problem. I can't honestly remember what the sort of the basis of that was, but there was something that had sort of severed those lines of communication, really.
Right. Hmm.
And I don't know what that was, so no, at that point I was in the dark. And then, this is coming up to Christmas 2004.
Hmm.
And just before Christmas, I get this call from Pat Lee himself to say, you know, Dreamwave is no more.
Oh no, the
And it's
dream
like,
is
oh,
over. Oh
yeah.
God.
And, that the whole company, in terms of its finances, has gone into bankruptcy proceedings. And wow, it's just like, and just before Christmas, it was like,
Mm.
oh God.
Mm.
And, suddenly I'm doing a little tot up of what they owe me.
Mm.
And, we're talking $10,000 plus.
Ooh.
Yes. So it's just like, oh, what? And, I suddenly become aware that my chances of getting this from a bankruptcy thing are minimal because there are some much bigger sums owed to bigger companies, Hasbro for a start. I'm
Mm,
pretty sure they hadn't been paying their license fee or royalties or whatever to Hasbro. So there
mm,
was a debt building up there. And, the printers, I don't think had been paid. The list probably went on and on. And I thought, even then, I thought, I bet I'm going to get, nothing back from this.
yeah. And did
And
you
this
get
was
anything
compa
back? I mean, yeah, the
No, no,
administrators would have gone in and no.
never did. I mean, we got paperwork and things like that over where we had to do that sort of tot up of what was owing. But no, I never heard anything.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, by this point, there, Pat Lee and Roger Lee had created another company called Dream Engine. And I always suspected that that had happened a while before and sort of funds had gone into the new company rather
Yeah.
than shoring up Dreamwave side of things. But we'll never know. This
No.
this thing is sort of, weirdly 20 years old now. There's
Yeah.
sort of this
I,
crash and burn.
do you know what
But
happened to Dream Engine? Did that actually do anything?
I think they might have dabbled with a few licenses, but I don't think anything much came out from them.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
nothing of any sort of great weight.
Yeah. If anyone out there
But yeah,
knows any more about that, drop it in the comments or something. It'd be
mm,
interesting to see.
yeah, it's funny at the Transformers Minicon, TF Nation Minicon I did recently in Reading. We did a whole, David, one of the organizers, had set up a whole retrospective of the Dreamwave era and the sort of end of it because it was that sort of anniversary time.
Right.
And yeah, it was weird going through it all again and we what could have been because we only got three of the six issues of Age of Wrath out. I think the fourth issue was poised or at the printers, didn't happen. Um, and Energon finished with issue 30. We still had six issues to go on that
Mm,
before it became Cybertron. And the Beast Wars thing never happened, and so on and so forth. So there was
mm.
a lot of story that never came out, which was very frustrating as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, not
Yeah.
a good time. And, just before that, and, you will know this as well, we'd been out to what turned out to be the final BotCon of the
Mm.
original era. And that
Yes.
was another one where, everything had crashed and burned with people being left out of pocket,
Yeah.
myself
During the
included.
convention. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it was great to be asked to go over again, having done 97 and 98 BotCon, um, and then to be invited back over again, even though, I hadn't done an awful lot, but I guess War Within gave me some relevance again, and historically
Mm.
I would always be relevant. You'd always be relevant because you've, done so much of it. Great, and yeah, they put together as is the nature of BotCon. It was a big thing.
Mm.
There were all sorts of things going on.
But what we didn't realize, and we might have touched on before, again, the sort of financially, the bottom had fallen out of it. It was no longer viable as a company, 3H. And I
Yeah,
think it might have just been Glenn by that point,
right.
1H.
Just H. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'd had that, 2004 ended up for me with a sort of double hit of non-payment and work disappearing again. I just thought, oh no, this feels like history repeating itself a bit here.
It's Transformers. It gives with one hand and takes away with the other.
Yeah. I mean, but the last time really was more the Marvel implosion of the of the mid 90s rather than Transformers itself.
Yeah.
But this was for me another mini sort of implosion of everything. And
Mm.
I was, and there was weirdly other stuff going on. I'd been contacted by the office of none other than Lorenzo di Bonaventura, who was the producer of the
Oh,
upcoming Transformers live action movie.
okay.
And I was
Ah,
like, well, and he'd reached out to me, and I remember speaking to him, and he said, yeah, we want you involved as some kind of, I suppose, consultant,
yeah.
someone to look at the scripts and lore and whatever else.
Mm.
And I was so excited about that. So
Oh,
on the one
yeah.
side, there was this amazing possibility that would sort of surfaced around that time, and the other was a lot of my work had just disappeared again.
Mm, mm.
So yeah, it was a weird time, that as we talk about the ups and downs of the industry and the business, but this was another big hit into 2004.
Yeah. So with the contact from Lorenzo, did that like how did that pan out very far? What happened with it?
Unfortunately not. I mean,
Mm,
it was one of those ones where it was all a kind of sounding out phone call, and everybody seemed very happy with the idea. And I can only assume, and this is pure assumption, that at this point, Michael Bay came on board as director, became involved in it, and
mm,
didn't want that at all. But that is pure
okay.
supposition. I don't know that.
Mm.
But whatever happened, that just went absolutely nowhere, which was a real shame.
Yeah, you can see why though. I mean, if they didn't have a director attached at the point they were
Mm,
trying to put something together, when a director becomes attached to a project, they very much have their own vision for it, and then they will call in anybody that they could, you know, would use as an advisor. They don't want the advisor to already be in place
yeah,
before they impose their vision on it.
yeah.
That's the wrong way around. The hierarchy doesn't work that way around.
No, I get that way. I mean, but it was for a moment a very bubble of excitement that I might be sort of, employed by Hollywood there. And
Yeah. I mean, did you make any contacts that have lasted, in any other ways? Because obviously
mm,
you do write kind of film proposals and whatever.
no, not through that. The
Okay.
film stuff I do since and now, it's mostly been through Mark Salisbury's sort of filmic connections.
Okay.
At one point, I'm sure I can talk about this. Well, I'm going to talk about this. Mark and I had, started doing sort of film ideas by this point. I think once I left Titan, Mark and I just sort of got our heads together and said, let's write a film.
Mm.
And we wrote one called Down, which was a sort of low budget horror film set in an underground car park.
Hmm.
And it was kind of fun, and we had some interest in it. But then another film set in an underground car park horror film came out called P2, I think it was called.
Right.
And that, I mean, it came out, but I don't think it did anything much. But unfortunately, it sort of scuppered ours a bit.
Mm.
But yeah, we carried on, sort of coming up with film ideas. But Mark it sort of does the official biography of Tim Burton,
Hmm.
and occasionally updates that, obviously, because he's still producing films. So updated editions of Burton on Burton come out, and so Mark maintain and still maintains a connection with Tim Burton. And he happened to know that Tim Burton had, I think, reacquired the rights to a manga series called My the Psychic Girl.
Right.
And, we and Mark, being very bold, just said, could we write a pitch proposal and, see if you like it?
Mm.
And we did that, and actually got hired to write the draft of a screenplay.
Wow.
But again, that one is on a shelf somewhere too, we
Yeah.
assume. So no,
Yeah.
the film thing while enjoyable, has also had its sort of frustrations as well, because everything takes a long time. Some things
Yeah,
go nowhere, you know. But
yeah.
anyway, yeah, so it was a weird time, start of 2005. I was wondering, what I was going to do really, had I got enough work otherwise to
Mm,
support
mm,
myself.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
and it
were
was a
kind of lean times for me as well. A couple of stints um, uh, in the studio in London for BKN, doing a
Mhm.
couple of projects, which was great because it got me introduced to TV. That was the intro that came from you, from through David Friedman, which initially
Yeah.
came through you. So that was really nice to get a foot in there. Um, I can't remember what else I was. I think I had a stint in a games. Was it around then? Maybe it was just slightly after then, but around about that time, I had a stint in a games company in Guildford working on a couple of games, which is nice, but it was like a
Mm.
year's contract, I think. But it helped have us some kind of regular income. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard just picking away.
I think I still had dribs and drabs of animation work. I can't remember when Legend of the Dragon was. Was that around that time
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
both ended up working on that?
mm,
Or at least I wrote one episode for that. But yeah, it was again one of those uncertain times
mm,
where it's like suddenly, oof, I wonder what the next year is going to bring.
yeah,
You know, little did I know at the time, IDW Transformers were round the corner, but there's another little loop to this story.
yeah. Slotted in between Dreamwave and
Yes.
IDW.
Fine, because we as sort of two creatives still had our wild fur company.
Mm,
And I think, as we mentioned in the last podcast, we produced a mini comic based on Armada for Activision. And I'm pretty sure, because we were both living in Chipping Norton, we probably got together over a coffee and said,
awesome beer.
yes, well, probably the latter, and said, well, sort of maybe we should pitch for the license.
Yeah, yeah.
Once it came adrift from Dreamwave and was up for grabs again, you know, there was a possibility, we kind of thought, especially because I had this sort of working relationship with Titan, who
Mm,
were doing comics, you know, and I remember I spoke to, we might have talked about it first, and then I spoke to Nick Landau at Titan to see whether he would be interested in a sort of Wild Fur Titan co-license bid
mm,
for Transformers.
yeah,
And
yeah,
he was, he
yeah,
could see, the worth in the idea. And, and then between us, you and I, we put together a package of stuff
yeah.
to
Yeah.
present to Hasbro. And,
Mm,
this is the bit we've been building up to that nobody really knows about it, that we were one of the companies bidding for the Transformers license back in early 2005.
yeah. And it made perfect sense to do it. I mean, because for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, because obviously we'd been associated with Transformers for so long, you as a writer and me as an artist. But then the added thing was the fact that you'd been involved in editorial for so long, so knew how the industry worked and knew the people, like people at Titan and like Nick, that you could kind of get into an association with there. I'd I'd obviously trained as a graphic designer, ran a graphic design studio, in the early part of my career. We'd produced a magazine, so I was, perfectly au fait with design and publishing in that sense, all the artworking and print and all that. So we had the skill sets and we had the experience to absolutely take that step and think we could do this. Like, we really thought, could we do this? Yes, we could do this.
Yeah.
We know how it's done. And with the backing of somebody like Titan, it was definitely worth jumping on board. And as as we said earlier, Dreamwave and as an example, they were young guys that, were well connected. They come out of the image thing and they knew how the industry worked. But and there are a lot of people around who do have the right skills and the experience, but don't have the balls to make that jump.
Mm.
But when you actually look at it probably from a factual point of view, we just thought, yeah, we could do this. Are we just going to say yes or no? And
Of course, there were pros and cons to us getting the license if we did. And
yeah,
I think we sat and had a lot of, fairly in-depth conversations about was this the right way to go or not?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember feeling that it was scary in some ways, a challenge. Um, but it almost felt like it was calling to us. It sounds a bit romantic, but it almost felt that way. It's like after all the things that had happened over the years, it's like it felt like it was for us to pick up that mantle and do something with it.
Yeah, for me, the sort of the cons side of it was that, obviously it was a big financial commitment. We both have had to put in, a substantial amount of base money to get this publishing venture up and running, even with Titan involved.
Hmm.
And then, to me, the other one was that it would have been all consuming in terms of our time.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been something we can do a lot of other little bits and pieces. We'd had to have been totally focused on, sort of being editors and production people and all those things,
Yeah.
even with the Titan resources of a studio and of sort of printers and things like that, we would still have been, and financials as well, we'd have had to have been, accounting
Hmm.
for everything. And some of that scared me more, just the sort of, the sheer amount of bookkeeping and and sort of work that would go into just being a company, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, but we did kind of continue with the thought and play with it. And I can remember us going to look at some studio space
Mm,
in Banbury, I think it was, wasn't it?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we found a nice little unit, which, you kind of walk into it and you just imagine how it would be set up, what the kind of almost like what the flow would be like, what the day flow would be like, what the week and month, just in terms of, like you say, that it's a huge commitment. And I mean, I've had this before when I've taken up contract jobs. So like certainly in games where I've been in a studio for a year or more, um, that it doesn't mean you can't do other little jobs. So,
Mm.
if any nice juicy little project comes along, you can't do it anymore. You're a whole different thing. You've got your own business to run. And when you've been used to being freelance, with all the ups and downs, and we've spoken on, a lot of these episodes about the ups, but certainly the downs about when there wasn't much work around, or and how that may affects your professional life, personal life, whatever. Um, but in spite of all the ups and downs, I think when you're somebody that has become used to that freelance lifestyle, you kind of like the flexibility of it. You like the fact that you can pick up opportunities when they come.
Mm.
That even when you're hungry and you need to go out and get work, there's a certain excitement about just like getting in touch with people and trying to create something, trying to create a possibility and an opportunity for some work. And then when
Yeah.
it comes to fruition, it's amazing. So those kind of, for better or worse, thrills would not be available,
No, but
but potentially the security of a successful
mm,
company.
yeah, yeah. And when you think that IDW had the license for 17 years, that could have been us, sort
Yeah,
of. and Titan doing it for that amount of time, the fan base was clearly there by that point to support a longer term publishing venture with Transformers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we went ahead, we put the pitch in, we obviously we ran it past Titan, they were involved to see what we were presenting to Hasbro, but I don't think it was probably much different. I think we pitched a Cybertron series to
Mm,
continue that, and I think we pitched a G1 based series,
mm,
which is more or less, what, any company would have done at that point.
yeah.
I can't remember the exact nature of our G1 pitch, but and I'm not even sure I have that stuff still,
Right.
which is a shame.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, it was all systems go, and we just were then waiting for to find out whether we had the license. So it was a
Mm,
nervy time, I think, to say the least.
yeah. Yeah. And what happened? I can't
But
remember.
yes, we didn't get the license. But part of me, I'm still not sure whether when we heard the news that it had gone to IDW, Hasbro would have contacted me. I'm sure there was, as much as I thought, oh, shame, there was also an element of relief in there somewhere.
But at least we know we tried.
We did, yeah. And and not just that, Hasbro took us seriously, Titan took us seriously, and there was no reason why we couldn't have made a really good fist of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what so it would be interesting to know who else was pitching for it.
Mm.
Um but and obviously as we all know, IDW got it. What did they already exist? Were they already publishing stuff?
Yes. Yeah, I mean they'd sort of started with things like 30 Days of Night. They were
Yes, I
they were
remember.
they were more a sort of slightly horror based publisher.
Mm,
So it wasn't sort of an immediate fit with what else was I think they were publishing at the time,
mm,
but they were a very viable proposition. So I mean, and I think you know my feeling is Hasbro wanted to work with a smaller company.
mm.
I don't know whether any of the big guys were in the mix for the license,
Right.
Marvel, DC, Dark Horse. I don't know whether they were put pitching as well.
Mm,
But, it always seems with Hasbro since Marvel, they've preferred to work with a newer, younger company,
yeah.
sort of, I suppose, because it's less corporate, less, sort of, there's no big sort of companies to be, sort of have to deal with the boards of and things.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But that would be my guess anyway. But yeah, so I would say we would have been in with a shout.
Mm,
No,
yeah, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah,
Anyway, what's
I don't know if it would make any difference that we weren't US based. I don't know. I know.
maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, that might have been an issue, that we weren't sort of literally on US soil.
Yeah.
Neither part of us or Titan.
Yeah.
And I suppose IDW probably had more of a Diamond Previews presence than Titan did at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was only after that Titan became more of an American comics publisher.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But Titan went on to pick up like the license for Doctor Who and things like that comics. And so, I mean, they were on that route anyway. So I think we'd have joined them at a good time if we had, sort of
Mm,
teamed up.
mm, yeah. Yeah, it does make you wonder whether being UK would have been an issue because all the printing and distribution would have to go through America. I mean, Titan picking up Doctor Who. I mean, Doctor Who's a UK property
Yeah,
anyway, so there would be that across the pond relationship with somebody for print and distribution. But we
yeah.
could have done
Mm,
it.
yes.
I remain convinced we could have done it. But like
Mm,
you, I think I don't know. How would life have panned out after that? I have no
Yeah,
idea.
would have been strange. Would have been strange. But
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, so that sort of brings us up to, I think, a good point just to finish. We can talk a bit more about, the next after that bits next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Interesting. Really
Mm.
interesting. As
Yeah, and I hope,
always, I found out an awful lot that I didn't know.
yeah, well, and I hope, because basically we've never spoken about this in
No.
any kind of interview anywhere. So, outside of us, Titan and Hasbro, I think this will come as a big surprise to many people.
Yeah, yeah, and if anybody wants to know any more about that or whatever, drop comments, send us message, whatever. We always like to see those and ponder them. And at some point, we will we will
Yeah.
have a look at some of the questions that have come in
Yes.
and address those. But anyway, more of that maybe next time. Good.
Perfect. Well, good to speak, Andrew,
Yep.
and we'll see you all back here for episode 14 in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, will do. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. See you soon. Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.